Okay, here we are. It is Monday, and it's a double parsha, Vayakhel Pekudei, and it is Parsha Chodesh, and it will be Machar Chodesh. It will be the day before Rosh Chodesh, since Shabbos is Erev Rosh Chodesh. So we have a lot to talk about this week. Um, Although it is a very detailed parsha with not so many amazing Rashis to delve into. But I want to start with a great Rashi, two great Rashis, which actually are not from today's Aliyah, but from yesterday's, from the first Aliyah of the combined parsha of Vayakhel Pekudei. Um, After reading so many parshios about the Mishkan, Truma, Tetzaveh, then we had Kitisa last week, which is a slight detour, talking a little bit about the Chet Egel, and then the reconciliation with Hashem and the holidays, the mitzvahs we have to keep, etc. Now coming all the way back here in Vayakhel Pekudei to the actual construction of the Mishkan, which was commanded back in Parshas Truma. So to command them in order to begin the construction of the Mishkan, the first pasuk tells us, Vayakhel Moshe es kol adas b'nei Yisrael. Moshe gathers the entirety of the Jewish people. That also shows the importance of this endeavor. This is not an endeavor of some elite group in the Jewish people, even though that's who would be serving in the Mishkan. The Mishkan was meant to be a place that was for everybody, that was representative of everybody, and therefore that was built by everyone. So even though if they weren't physically building, they were going to donate, they were going to listen, they were going to be there, they were going to support, they were going to do all kinds of things. And therefore, this tzibui lemelechas hamishkan, this command to begin the construction of the Mishkan, had to be al kol adas b'nei Israel, like a few other parshios in the Torah are. Vayomer alehem, Eila hadvarim asher tziva Hashem lasos osam. Here are the following things that God commanded you to do. Commanded you to do to build the Mishkan. Now, before we even go on to the next pasuk, Rashi points out over here the timing of this tzivui, of this command. Lamachras Yom Kippurim Yared Min Hahar. This is all taking place the day after Yom Kippur, after the final set of 40 days is done. If you remember, we talked about this timeline a little bit before in the past, but to remind you, the first time Moshe Rabbeinu goes up, he goes up for 40 days. He goes up of Vav Sivan, the day of the receiving of the Torah, and he stays there all the way till he comes down and shatters the luchos on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. Then he has to ask forgiveness for the Jewish people. So he goes up on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and comes back on Rosh Chodesh Elul. After that point, he has to go back up for a third set of 40 days, even though the Jewish people are forgiven. We saw in Kitisa, there's still tension between God and the Jewish people. It's not perfect. He has to go and repair the relationship and get the 13 attributes of mercy and the keys to tefillah and be able to totally meld the relationship once again between God and the Jewish people. And that is from Rosh Chodesh Elul all the way 40 days later till Yom Kippur. And it's on Yom Kippur that he comes down. During that time period, it's Psalach Hashnei Luchos Avanim Kirishonim. We saw in last week's Parsha, he's commanded to make a new set of Luchos and finally to come down to give those Luchos to the Jewish people. That's what happens on Yom Kippur, which is why, of course, the whole period of Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur is a period of forgiveness. It's a period of Mechila and Slicha, of forgiveness and of compassion from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because it was once upon a time exactly that period when we reconciled with him. It is that period again. Yom Kippur is the ultimate day of total kapara, total atonement, total forgiveness, just like it was for the Jewish people in that moment. The entire incident of Chet HaEgel is as if it is erased. And now Moshe Rabbeinu comes down with the second set of luchos to renew the covenant with the Jewish people. The very first thing he tells them to do is build a Mishkan. That, of course, is so important. Either because, according to Rashi, the Mishkan was supposed to be the final stage of kapara for the Chet HaEgel. So as soon as you come down with the second luchos, you're totally forgiven. Okay, now start to build. Instead of using your gold and silver to build a calf, use your gold and silver to build the Mishkan, and that will be the final step of your atonement. Or even according to the Ramban. The Ramban says that it wasn't necessarily intended as a kapara only for Chet HaEgel. It was intended from the very beginning that they would build the Mishkan. But even the Ramban agrees that Vayakhel is L'machras Yom Kippurim. That even though the idea for the Mishkan predated Chet HaEgel, the command only came after Yom Kippur, after the total forgiveness. So the Ramban would also agree to this timeline, even though they disagree about the timeline, about the whole philosophy of the Mishkan to begin with, and the timeline of the Chet HaEgel in terms of Kitisa and Truma. But nonetheless, they all agree that this is L'machras Yom Kippurim. It's the start, it's the new beginning. Either they are meant to atone for the Chet HaEgel by building a Mishkan, or now that they've received the Torah anew, according to the Ramban, they're meant to construct the Mishkan to continue that experience of Har Sinai as they go forward. So according to either one of them, there's a rationale for why this Vayakhel, this gathering, is happening exactly at this moment after Yom Kippur, as they enter the next phase of post-Matan Torah Jewish history. Now, you'd expect the next pasuk to go on to the details of how to construct this Mishkan and what to build first and who to hire, all the things that happen from pasuk Daled and on. However, we have an interruption of 3 psukim, Beis, Gimel, and Daled, which have nothing to do with the Melechas HaMishkan. We're on the edge of our seats. Asher tzivah Hashem lasos hasam. Here's the things that God commanded you to do to build the Mishkan. ... Sheshes yamim te'aseh melacha v'yom hashvi'i elachem kodesh Shabbos Shabboson l'Hashem kol ha'osevo melacha yumas. For 6 days you should work, on the 7th day you should rest. No one should do anything, any labors on the Shabbos. Anyone who does gets capital punishment. For example, lo sevaru eish b'chol moshe miyam Shabbos. One of the malachos, don't make a fire in all of your dwelling places on Shabbos. Now, he returns to the story. This is the following things that God commanded you to do. There's an interruption of Beis and Gimel until we get back to Daled, which is the original storyline of Aleph. So why does Shabbos come to interrupt the Melechas HaMishkan? Very important question. Why are these 2 psukim about Shabbos sandwiched in right in the midst of the high point of the story of being commanded as to how to build the Mishkan? So Rashi tells us over here one explanation. There's another important explanation, but Rashi tells us one. Hiktim lahem azharas Shabbos letzivu melechas hamishkan lomar she'eno doche Shabbos. Why does it tell us first about the command of Shabbos before going to the actual construction of the Mishkan? To tell us that the construction of the Mishkan with all its labors does not override the prohibition of labor on Shabbos. Even though you think, Bnei Yisrael, you are involved in the most important endeavor ever, to build a sanctuary for God, a place of meeting, a place of korbanos, that's a supreme goal. The place of the spiritual center of the Moed, the place where we meet God. You say, it overrides everything, takes over everything. God says, no, Shabbos is still more important than Melechas HaMishkan, which is meant not only to teach them that practical lesson about what they cannot do on Shabbos, but also to tell us in terms of the hierarchy, just how important Shabbos is. Aside from Pikuach Nefesh, Shabbos is pretty much at the top of the charts. That's an important lesson. Second lesson, of course, over here of the juxtaposition of Shabbos and Melechas HaMishkan is to teach us, as Chazal point out, that the way we know the 39 prohibited categories of labor on Shabbos that we're not allowed to engage in is based on the 39 categories of labor that were used in the construction or maintenance, Machlokas Rashi Tosos, of the Mishkan. So the 2 topics are juxtaposed to teach us that we should extrapolate the malachos that were done in the Mishkan, 39 of them, are now the exact categories of malachos that are forbidden on Shabbos, and from there we derive all of Hilchos Shabbos and the thousands of volumes that have been written since then. I wish you all a wonderful day and an enjoyable day ahead. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi. You too.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All right, have a good day. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.